Today, we all know Alaska as a frozen, icy cold American state, which is known for its snow-capped mountains, ski resorts, humongous pine trees, and, well, its border with Canada. But how many of you are aware of the fact that Alaska wasn't always a part of America? Yep, as unbelievable as it may seem, this far north state was once a part of America's biggest competitor, Russia. Today, being the largest American state area-wise, Alaska holds a certain level of importance in its own context. But one thing that always comes to your mind when you hear this fact is that why on earth would America buy a piece of land from Russia? And more importantly, why would Russia sell it? In this video, we'll discuss and unwind one of the most historical and talked about events of American history. So let's get started. Alaska, the frozen state. Before getting into the details of the whole thing, first, it's important to understand and know enough about Alaska. So, Alaska is a non-contiguous state present on the northwest extremity of America. Being on the extreme north of the country, Alaska shares a border with the Canadian territory of the Yukon on one side and the province of British Columbia on the other side. If we talk about area, Alaska covers 665,384 square miles and is the largest state of America in terms of land. On the contrary, in terms of population, Alaska comes at the bottom of the list. Now, I know that nearly all of us believe that Alaska is nothing but piles of snow and mountains that extend for miles, and for the most part this description is accurate. But what if I tell you that Alaska is one of the richest states in America? If we begin to count the number of natural resources present in the state, then surely they'll stack up to be more than several of the other popular states. With sources like whale oil, fur, fishing, petroleum, and gold, this frozen state adds up billions of dollars to the American economy every single year, and these resources are no way near running out. All of this has been pretty amazing for the people of Alaska, since this has enabled the state government to completely erase any types of sales or income taxes. On top of all this, the people of Alaska get an annual stipend of about $1,600 every year. To make it short, Alaska isn't just an enormous land of ice, but an economic gold mine that's making this country rich with every passing year. But the question here that must be asked is, if this state is so rich in resources, why did Russia get rid of it? The Russian POV. Now, to understand this purchase, it's important to know about the history of the Russian presence in the area and their point of view regarding this large piece of land. So, Russian America was actually first inhabited by merchants and fur traders who had come here through Siberia. These traders came to Alaska in 1732, and by the end of the century, the Russian American Company was formed and given permission to hunt for fur in the region. Because of being so far away from actual Russian cities and extremely harsh weather, there were no colonies formed in the region. However, some missionaries were sent by the Russian government to build churches all around the area. By the start of the new century, almost 700 Russians had established themselves in Alaska, and in 1821, Tsar Alexander I declares Russia's sovereignty over the North American Pacific coast. By the 1850s, Alaska started becoming a bit of a problem for the Russians. Because of the ongoing Crimean War with France and Britain, the Russian Empire was facing serious financial troubles, and controlling a land so far away was getting hard for them. Similarly, in the context of the whole empire, Alaska was a distant and relatively minor outpost, generating limited revenue from the fur trade and requiring significant subsidies from the Russian government. Moreover, the California gold rush meant that if there was any gold in Alaska, Americans and Canadians would overwhelm the Russian presence, and then it would be even more difficult to maintain their sovereignty in this foreign land. However, despite all these reasons, the principal reason for the sale was that the hard-to-defend colony would be easily conquered by British forces which were based in neighboring Canada in any future conflict, and Russia did not wish to see its arch-rival being next door. Therefore, seeing all these reasons, Emperor Alexander II decided to sell the territory. Because of sharing a long border with Alaska and their obvious dominance in North America, the U.S. was the only choice for this sale, as Canada was a British territory, so there was no point in selling to them. After discussing the proposal amongst themselves for 2 years, Russians finally offered to sell the territory to the United States, hoping that its presence in the region would derail any British plan. However, no deal was reached, as the risk of an American Civil War was a more serious matter for the U.S. government at that time. The American POV. With 48 states without Alaska at that time, America was still an enormous country. And in the 1800s, when the population wasn't this much, one might wonder what would provoke the American government to go for a land buy when they didn't have any obvious reasons to make this move. Well, for starters, this buy wasn't just of economic interest. Due to multiple reasons, it was a combination of political, economic, strategic, and ideological factors. After coming back from the Civil War, the government was aware that both sides had suffered heavy losses, and the country needed a sort of morale boost that'll help them move forward. It was quite obvious in certain fractions of the government that expanding the country's territories in North America was a must-do move. Moreover, this expansion would mean that America would have a significant presence and access to the Pacific. Similarly, the California Gold Rush of 1848 to 1855 had drawn thousands of people to the West Coast, and the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad from 1863 to 1869 was also happening, which meant that it would directly link the East and West Coasts by rail. As a result, Alaska, because of its strategic location and natural resources, was seen as a crucial addition to the country's expanding territory. Secretary of State William H. Seward, who was a strong believer in expanding the U.S. territories, believed that pretty soon Asia would emerge as a major trade market for America, and because of this, Alaska was an important stronghold from a strategic point of view. He knew that this territory was an important foothold in the Pacific and would be able to provide access to new trade opportunities. Even in terms of national security, Alaska's location provided a lot of benefit to the government. Last but not least, the U.S. government had keen interest in the economic potential of Alaska. It was a known fact that Alaska was rich in fur resources, and that was the major reason for the Russian-American company's operation in the region. Similarly, the region was renowned for an extensive fish supply that would be able to help the fishing industry of the company. Now, even during that time, there were officials that believed that Alaska was rich with hidden minerals, but it wasn't an established fact during the time of the sale. However, later on, it would turn out they were in fact right. The negotiations and the purchase. After the Russian government's decision to sell Alaska, the next step was to meet the potential buyer and get the right price. Over the winter of 1859 to 1860, Russian Minister to the United States Eduard de Steckel started meeting with different U.S. officials about the sale of the Russian-American company assets. Now, during these meetings, Steckel met different state and government officials, and most of them gave positive responses regarding the purchase of Alaska. While on one hand Steckel was operating from the Russian side, on the American side there was another visionary who was having meetings of his own. So William H. Seward, who was the Secretary of State under Presidents Abraham Lincoln and Andrew Johnson, was also an important figure in the negotiations to purchase Alaska. Seward believed that acquiring Alaska would provide the United States with a strategic advantage, and hence he strongly took part in these negotiations. In 1866, Eduard de Steckel was officially instructed by the Russian government to negotiate the sale of Alaska to the United States. De Steckel, who was a skilled diplomat, soon met Seward in a series of meetings. After several months of negotiations, the two sides reached an agreement on March 30, 1867. According to the treaty signed by Seward and de Steckel, the United States would purchase Alaska from Russia for $7.2 million, an amount which is approximately $125 million in today's money. Aftermath. It's obvious that such a big step got a lot of media and public attention. In the beginning, the news of this purchase resulted in a widespread controversy in the country, and many Americans started questioning the decision of spending millions of dollars on a remote, barren land. Seeing the public's opinion, the press quickly jumped in and mockingly named this purchase as Seward's Folly. However, even after the negative press and criticism, Seward and President Andrew Johnson remained firm on their decision. And on October 18, 1867, the transfer of ownership took place in Sitka, Alaska, starting the formal beginning of American rule in the territory. After the transfer, Russian citizens remained in Sitka for a bit, but soon nearly all of them returned to Russia. After seeing the government's dedication and the claims that there are a lot of resources to exploit in Alaska, a large number of Americans rushed to the territory. But pretty soon, they became aware of the fact that to turn these resources into considerable profit, they would require a lot of capital, and a lack of any structure meant that Alaska wouldn't work for them because of the lack of obvious structure. So, most of these settlers soon left, and by 1873, Sitka's population had declined from about 2,500 to just a few hundred. So, all in all, by 1880, the final outcome looked like the United States had acquired an area which was twice as large as Texas, but no one was willing to move and work there, and it seemed like it would just remain a huge, barren, and cold piece of uninhabited land. However, this opinion finally changed after the Great Klondike Gold Rush in 1896, and Alaska finally came to be seen as a valuable addition to the United States of America. The financial return on the purchase. One thing that a person often thinks and evaluates after making a purchase is that, was this purchase a financially good decision? Well, the same question is asked in terms of the purchase of Alaska too. This purchase has been called the bargain basement deal, and many people believe that the amount of resources easily outweighs the amount of money used to purchase Alaska. As of the last survey done in October 2022, Alaska had a total employment of 316,900. The state's median household income is more than $86,000, which ranks it at the 12th spot. Moreover, according to a 2013 study by Phoenix Marketing International, Alaska had the fifth largest number of millionaires per capita in the United States, with a ratio of 6.75%. So, one thing's for sure, that Alaska has certainly given much more back in terms of the financial returns and has proven itself as an extremely valuable addition to the country. The benefits that make this purchase a good move. So now that we all agree that it was a financially sound move, and it has certainly helped with the economic standpoint, it's important to see what benefits and resources made Alaska an economic gold mine. Well, for starters, one of the most obvious benefits of Alaska has been the tons of natural resources that have been discovered in the region after the purchase. Over the last century or so, Alaska has become a major producer of oil, natural gas, gold, copper, and other minerals. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline System, which was completed in 1977, transports oil from the Prudhoe Bay oil field to Valdez and adds up billions of dollars in revenue for the U.S. economy. One other advantage that may seem small at first is the enormous growth of the country's fishing and seafood industry. Alaska is among the richest fishing grounds in the world. The seafood industry contributes significantly to the state's economy, with Alaska producing over 60% of the U.S. seafood catch. In 2020, the value of Alaska's seafood catch was estimated at $1.7 billion. If all of this wasn't enough, Alaska is stunningly beautiful, and attractions like the Denali National Park and the Northern Lights fetch millions of tourists each year. In 2019 alone, Alaska welcomed more than 2.2 million visitors, which generated $2.5 billion in visitor spending alone. And these were all just economic benefits. In terms of state sovereignty and security, Alaska's geographic location has insane advantages. The U.S. Army maintains several major military bases in the state, including Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson and Eielson Air Force Base, which provide critical support for U.S. military operations in the Pacific. Conclusion. When it comes to spending millions of dollars of the state's money, especially 2 centuries ago, when this was a huge amount, it's obvious that you'll get a certain level of criticism from the people around you, and this was exactly what happened with Seward and the president. But the thing is that would those critics feel the same way about Alaska today, especially after seeing what the state has brought on the table? I think not. I'll see you soon in another video, and if you feel that there's something more to be added in this one, let me know in the comments.